All right,
Can
good.
I turn my video off?
Sure.
Okay.
We'll see you again at the end.
Okay. I'm nodding my head, so. That was always the trouble. I'd be nodding my head when I was teaching, then I think, nobody can see you. Nod your head.
All right, so here we go. 1, 2. Where are you going, Walter? You're freaking me out.
Light off.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Walter Dial, CPA and tax partner at DRF, CPAs and Advisors in Bethesda, Maryland. Our mission here on the Exit Readiness Podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building sellable business value and for then helping you plan your eventual exit from the business. We want to help you build a business that is sellable and then exit successfully on your own terms and conditions. Today's topic is planning for life after the business.
Hey, Pat, I'm really excited about today's presentation. I'm sure you remember when we were taking classes to become certified exit planners, one of the things that kind of surprised me and probably you as well, one day at class, they showed a slide. It had the results of a PwC study. And shockingly, to me at least, it said that 75%, I think it was 75%, of business owners who had sold their business within the previous 2 years were very unsatisfied with their lives. I mean, that really just blew me away. I don't know about you.
Yeah, well, that's right. The statistics are startling. Business owners, it seems like, business owners often don't realize how much purpose, meaning, and significance they actually experience as a business owner until they leave. And unless they have a plan that includes activities, goals, whatever, that will result in that same, level of purpose and meaning in life, those statistics show they're not going to be happy. Most 7 or 8 out of 10 are not going to be happy unless they've done that. And today we have with us Joanne Waldman, who has been helping business owners think through that issue of what's next after the business for more than 30 years. Joanne has her own coaching practice, New Perspective Coaching, and she works with clients throughout the United States. She has a master's of education and counseling, a bachelor's in psychology, both from the University of Missouri and Columbia. She's a licensed professional counselor, a professional certified coach, a board certified coach via the Center for Credentialing and Education, and a certified retirement coach. So Joanne not only has extensive experience, but also extensive training. And I love her because she's a huge baseball fan, living in St. Louis, even though her team is one of our enemies here in Washington Nats land. But good morning, Joanne. Great to have you with us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Well, thank you for having me, both Pat and Walter. I'm excited to be here. And, I have seen over and over again that statistic you're talking about. I've had so many clients who come and, let's say, 6 months after they sold their business, and they're not happy. I can give you one example. I had a gentleman, he'd sold his business. He was 51 when he came to me. I think he'd sold his business. He was 48 and never needed to work again. But he needed to work. He felt like he needed to do something and he wanted to do something. He was working for a friend and he was so unhappy. And we spent time together helping him figure out what would give him meaning and purpose and fulfillment moving forward. And we did that. He decided that what he loved to do, what he called doing ethical business deals. And he had real difficulty thinking that he could earn money doing ethical business deals. And when we reframed that notion that he would be helping not only himself, but the person that he did the deal with. It really shifted his perspective. And he went on to start a consulting business. So he was a great example. He was so unhappy working for somebody else, doing something that he didn't like doing. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. So Joanne, when we refer to these statistics, as I mentioned a minute or two ago, we mentioned things like meaning, purpose, significance, those things that, again, owners don't always realize that they're experiencing so much while they're in business. But when they leave, they find out real quick that, oh my gosh, what's my purpose in life? What would you say are some of the things an owner would need to think now to replace for when they eventually leave? Because it's one of the things we really emphasize is if you don't take the time now to plan for life after the business, you're going to end up being one of those statistics. What would you say? What are some of the things that you would say they need to think about replacing?
Well, there are 5 things that they need to replace, Pat and Walter. And let's talk about what those are. The first one is status. Think about when we go to a party, to a function, what's the first thing people ask us? What do you do, right? And so you have to come up with a new definition for that. What am I going to tell people? So the status is really important. The next thing is socialization, being around others. That's certainly changing now. You both have changed we all changed how we're around others. But you need to think about, how am I going to find connectedness when I leave my business? The third thing is time management. It's a huge issue for people who leave their business, for retirees. How will I manage my time without the business? How am I going to set my daily structure? How am I going to set goals at that point? What am I going to do with my time? And, people, the ability to do all that, to the time management, doesn't go away. It's just more the opportunity changes, and you've got to really plan for that as well. Financial remuneration is another one. I think that's what you and Walter deal with. And then, as we're talked about, the biggest thing that they've got to replace is purpose and meaning. And statistically, if people retire without meaning and purpose, they couldn't be dead in 2 years. That's not another statistic that anybody wants to hear. There's been research around that. So where do we find meaning? Typically, it comes from pursuing purpose. And that often means helping other people or giving back on a bigger level, more global level. But purpose, like you were saying, I think is really the number one thing we have to really look at. Where do I find meaning, and how am I going to make sense out of all that? Does that make sense to you both? Those 5 things? And you've got to,
absolutely,
definitely.
If you don't figure out those 5 things, it could have consequences for your life, because it could be even emotional, psychological, even spiritual consequences if you don't figure out how to replace those 5 things.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Joanne, let me ask you something. You've known Pat for a long time, and this won't come as a surprise to you, but he is very, very skilled when it comes to what we call the soft side of our exit planning engagements, and that's helping clients to start thinking along, the exact lines that you've been talking about. He's just great at that. And one of the tools he uses is he tries to, he asks the client a lot of questions, and one of the goals is to try to figure out, and the way he phrased it is the client being pushed out of the business, or are they being pulled towards something? And, a pushed out business owner is typically burned out, just doing too much, wearing too many hats. Or maybe the business is just kind of falling apart in general, or maybe there's health issues or something like that. A business owner who's being pulled from the business, he has a vision for his next stage in life, and he's being pulled towards it. So it would seem that, those two positions are going to result in a drastic difference in satisfaction with life after selling the business. Have you seen that play out?
I have. I mean, that's a really great way to look at it, Walter, because I've found that individuals who don't leave on their own accord, it takes them a long time to really wrap their head around it, feel good about it, and move forward. Sometimes it would take a year and a half even. I have seen that it takes them that long to feel comfortable about why they left and how they can move forward. So when they're pulled, like you said, they plan more, they're happier, they have an easier time moving forward. So I think that's really important. And it's a perspective issue, I think, as well. And what are they leaving the business to do? What are they looking forward to? So that I think is a really good way to put it. Can I back up for just a minute? I want to define retirement.
Sure.
I define retirement as following your dream and finding your giftedness. So I think that's part of what we're talking about. If they have a dream that's going to move them forward, that's compelling them, so much easier to go through this process.
Yeah, I mean, your definition of retirement really lines up with the concept of someone who's being pulled versus pushed. So I really like that definition.
It doesn't talk about money. It doesn't talk about anything, really. What is their dream? Now, that presupposes they know what their dream is. That's where I come in, if they don't.
Yeah.
Or even if they do, I can be helpful.
So along those lines, are there questions that you suggest an owner ask themselves as they start to begin to plan retirement or their exit?
I think there are a lot of good questions that an owner can ask themselves. I have some favorites that I ask everybody, and then there are some that can be very specific to their situation. One of the first ones I love to ask is, how creative can you be with change? How creative are you with change? Because think about this time is more change in your life than any other time. And when you put the word creative next to change, I find that it sparks something. It sparks something in me, sparks something in my clients. It's a real different way of looking at change. Most people don't like change, don't necessarily deal with it that well. When you put the word creative next to it, I think it really helps you think out of the box. There are many more I ask. How would you define success? I took a class not that long ago. There were 25 people on the call, and there were 25 different definitions of success. So it's very person specific. And I think it's really important for people to get clear about, what does that mean moving forward? What is my success going to look like, sound like, be like? Several others. What do you not want any more of in your retirement or in your transition? I've worked with a couple of business owners that didn't necessarily like some of the things that they were doing. And so we really worked to figure out, moving forward, what skills you have that you want to use moving forward. What dreams do you still have to fulfill? Things like, what do you want to learn? There's several more that I love to ask. Things like, where do you find awe, wonder, and delight? What's your favorite time of the day, the week, the month, the year in your life? Those are some of the biggies. And then I think one of my favorites, don't know that I ask everybody this one, but it's certainly something to think about. Why are you on this planet? So those are some of the questions I like to ask. Any of those?
So Joanne, in addition to questions like that, you also use some assessments. I know that. What are the assessments you use? How do they correlate with those types of questions that you just shared with us? And how do you use them in helping your clients, with their transition out of the business or to retirement?
Sure. Thank you for asking that. So I use two different assessments. The first one is called the Retirement Success Profile, the RSP, and it looks at 15 factors that are necessary for a successful retirement. It's really a snapshot of your retirement readiness. There's 120 items on that one, and it's a psychologically based assessment. And it looks at things like we call work reorientation, where you're taking your identity from work or outside of work. And that is an issue. If, let's say, you're 10 years away from leaving your business, having a low score on work reorientation, taking all my identity from my business is fine. But let's say you're 6 months away, and that tells me there's a lot of work to do around that. Your attitude toward retirement, think about where we get our attitude about retirement and transition. It could be from peers, it could be from media, it could be from so many things. How are we making decisions internally or externally? How is our perceived health? That's probably the most interesting one in terms of picks up everything. If you've had an illness, a sickness, a brush with death. Financial security, which is also a perceived factor. I like to work with people about what's enough, abundance kinds of issues, their perspective around money. Very interesting that things we learned as a kid really show up again. How happy are they right now? How happy are they going to be tomorrow? Hope for tomorrow, like meeting again. Leisure interests. We haven't talked a lot about leisure yet. Leisure is really important in transition. Having a no leisure mentality can be just as stressful as having leisure in your life or not having leisure in your life. Adaptability is how do we deal with change? Are we happier now or were we happier in the past? Dependent care issues, which is elder care, child care, spousal care, adult children care, even familial care, even aging pet care can be a stopper in retirement. Family and relationships, perception of age. I always ask my clients, back to another powerful question, how old would you be if you didn't know how old you were? Either one of you want to answer that? How old would you be if you didn't know how old you were?
I think Pat's early 70s and I'm late 40s.
There you go. So
that hurts.
I'll ask Pat. I know how old Walter feels. How old sometimes do you feel that you are? If you didn't know how old you were.
You asking me, Joanne?
Yeah, I am.
I typically feel a lot younger than I am, I think.
Exactly. So
yeah.
People tend to go back at least 20 years.
Yeah, I would say that's probably right for me. Yeah. Hey, in regard to leisure, you mentioned leisure a second ago. With the owners that we deal with, as much as they're not thinking about the meaning and purpose after the business piece, they are thinking about leisure at least a little bit.
Yeah.
And so it is important, of course it is, and particularly after you've worked sometimes 30 or 40 years building a business and all that goes along with building a business, you're looking forward to that more of a life of leisure, if you will. Can you talk a little bit at least, as to anything you'd say about ways to do leisure that, if you will, that could be more helpful or impactful, or anything you might say about how not to do leisure?
Well, leisure is really interesting because there's a paradox around leisure. Because you think, oh, I'm going to leave my business and I'm just going to rest and play. And that's not what leisure is about. Because if you want to play golf all day long, golf then becomes your job. So leisure has to, by definition, has to be diversionary. And I found that people either had a leisure activity that they wanted to go back to because they were working so much they didn't have time to do it, or something they've always wanted to do, never had the opportunity to do, or want to get back involved with, let's say, their spouse. They're used to do some kind of leisure activity with their spouse that they say, we didn't have time to do that anymore. So it's really important to understand how important leisure is, but also that you just can't play golf all day long. So typically people sell their business, they go into retirement, and then 6 months later, they're bored to tears and saying, what am I going to do now? So I work with individuals as well as couples to help them figure out how to put all that together.
Mm-hmm.
So Joanne, one retirement route, for lack of a better phrase, that I think a lot of business owners think about is filling up their time with maybe volunteering at their church or joining boards, those types of activities. Have you seen that done successfully, or do you have cautionary words in that regard?
I have seen that successfully. Volunteering, I like my clients to do a little research and help think about what it is they want to do in terms of volunteering. They can go to, you can do it online now, looking at what volunteer opportunities are in your area. I even have them do something called informational interviewing to talk to the volunteer organizations to see if there's a good fit. I had a client one time, he was an attorney, and he decided he wanted to volunteer, and he went, this is great, he went to clown school, and then he volunteered at the children's hospitals as a clown 3 days a week. And it was, talk about meaning and purpose. He got so much meaning and purpose out of doing that. Isn't that a great story? He went to clown school.
That is a great story. That's unbelievable.
Well, it isn't. I don't like clowns. I think clowns are kind of creepy. So he went from being an attorney to a clown. I don't know.
But, he literally worked 3 days a week at the hospital and worked with kids, who were sick and who had all kinds of issues. And it made him feel great.
Yeah, well, he probably wasn't one of those creepy clowns.
I hope not. I never saw him all made up as a clown. But, I always tell that story because I just think it brings a smile, saying, there's not one right way to do this. You kind of have to find your own way, or have somebody help you find your way. I always say I work with baby boomers who don't know what they want to do when they grow up, or do know what they want to do and don't know how to get there.
Yeah, so as we come to a close here in the next few minutes, Joanne, I know you would say that this is the perfect time for an owner to rehearse for life after the business. Why would you say that?
Well, our lives have been turned upside down, haven't they, from this whole pandemic. And a lot of people are finding out what it's like to stay home a little bit more than they've been. I think it's a great time to think about, I like to call it going on the reinvention tour. I think it's a great time to really think about your life and how you want to spend your time. People are really getting quite reflective right now. I know I've had conversations with a lot of people about what it's like not to commute to work every day and how that is been significant for them, given them more time in their life, more time to do things that they wanted to do. And, what have you discovered about yourself since you've been home? I think that's really important to think about. What have you done with any extra free time? And how do you want this to be different in the future?
That's great, Joanne. So as we're wrapping up, is there anything else that you'd like to mention that we haven't asked about as we come to a close?
Well, I want to go back to the assessment just for a minute, because the information I get from that assessment, it tells me what you've worked on right now and what you want, need, or value for the future. And it compares a lot of the scores, and it gives me their strengths and what I call their focus factors, things that they might want to spend some attention on. So that's why those are so important. It really gives us a great picture of where they are right now and what they have left to do moving forward. So I think that's why those assessments are so important, so people can get a very clear picture of what they're facing as they transition out of their business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. We always like to ask our guests, is there anything, any book, event, product that you'd like to promote today?
I'd love to promote the assessment, both assessments. And I'm willing to offer $50 off for one. And if a couple wants to do it, $100 off the cost of that. They just have to mention the podcast. And they can reach me at 314-469-3288. My email is Joanne, Joanne, at newperspectivecoaching.com. Perspective is singular. Newperspectivecoaching.com.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Joanne. This has been very, very informative, and I'm sure our listeners are really going to benefit from it. I know Pat and I have definitely enjoyed it. Pat, I'm going to ask you if you have any final thoughts, but one thing that's popped in my mind throughout the entire discussion goes back to what we're always saying. You need to start planning early, because you can see, if all of a sudden you decide to retire tomorrow, you will not have planned for all these important things that Joanne's been talking about.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And I'm just going to reiterate that probably. If you wait until you're, in quotes, ready to leave to start this kind of planning, you're not going to be ready to leave in regard to having as a happy and fulfilling life after the business as you could, is if you started sooner rather than later in this planning, because it can take time to develop interest. You may be for years, decades, maybe you've been so busy in the business that you really haven't had an opportunity to develop interest outside of the business that could result in meaning and purpose and giving back in those things. And it takes intentionality. We've observed it takes intentionality. It takes time. And, some of the exit routes, Walter, you'll agree with this, that we're helping owners think through, sale to insiders or sale to an ESOP, combination thereof, sale to children. Some of those exit routes are more conducive because they take longer to get to put in place and to execute. And so you've got some time. That's one of the advantages of some of those exit routes like that, where you can take time to figure out and be intentional about figuring out where we're going to get, where we're going to replace that meaning, purpose in life after the business and put the plan in place. But I would strongly encourage Joanne and her services, her experience. I've had experience with her and a client, and she's just done a phenomenal job. And the lady just continues to enjoy working with her. And so highly recommend and commend Joanne and her assessments and her coaching.
Thank you, Pat. Can I add one final thought?
Sure.
excuse me. I don't know that we put the statistic, I'm sorry, out there. Only 14% of people typically plan for their future, which isn't very many. And I'm finding that if people want to do this kind of work, even starting 3 to 5 years before they sell the business is a good thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this has been great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And listeners, if you'd like to have help in maximizing the value of your business or planning for your eventual exit, you can reach Pat at 301-859-0860. You can reach me at 301-951-9090. You can access resources at exitreadiness.com, grfcpa.com, and nslp.com. And just a reminder, there's a lot of great information regarding COVID-19 on those websites as well, including some Facebook Live events that Pat and I were a part of for a few weeks. So we just thank you very much for listening. And until next time on the Exit Readiness Podcast, this is Walter Dial and Pat Ennis signing off.